are you doing? He said, they're idiots. Razi is going to do it. And she did it for 5 years. And she did it because she had the support of the Hindu majority of the country. She reached out to them. She held town hall meetings. No one knows this. No one remembers, except maybe in India and Pakistan. They've heard about her. She was a great person. And she was diverse in other ways. I mean, she dressed as a man. She went to battle. She was a good warrior. But she also crossed the lines. She had an advisor, a slave, an African slave, who was her most trusted companion, and many said that he was her lover. Razia did what she wanted to do. She did wonderful stuff, but finally she was dragged down, and both she and her companion were killed. Akbar the Great, greatest Indian leader after Gandhi. Not because he'd just be a great warrior and administrator and so on. He was trying from the word go to bring all these religions and people together. He was sick of fighting. He convened a big debate out of his own pocket. He brought in Jesuit priests, and he brought in Jewish rabbis. He brought in all sorts of every strain of Muslim, Buddhists, and so on. And they had this roaring debate that went on 7 years. People were trying to kill each other. It got so nasty. And fighting and screaming and weeping and wailing. And finally he said, enough, end of debate. And he tried to fuse them all into one faith called Din-e-Ilahi. Okay, it didn't work. I think only 20 people actually converted until he finally let that one go. But this is a big deal. No one knows about this. No one gives India the credit for this kind of stuff. I should also note that in his day, 20% of the material assets in the world were in India. And by 1850, and Indian absorption by the British Empire, I think that plus another 5% had shifted to Britain. India paid for the British Empire more than anybody else. Who ever talks about that? This is what they leave us: public education, welfare, inclusion, fairness, evidence-based inquiry, progressive social reforms. This is stuff that we treasure. Even if we don't accomplish it that often, we still think this is the best. At least, well, there's certain politicians in my country who might not agree, but what went wrong? Well, I don't have time for that. Lots of stuff went wrong. External stuff, internal stuff. My next book is to try and take this into the future and the present, and past. We can't spend our lives in the past. We've got to take this and try and reshape the narrative. I want to bring the story to where most of the people are, and they're not reading and they're not thinking very much anywhere. They're watching things, they're playing with this and apps and DVDs and Netflix and so on. I want to bring this story into a narrative. It's called Golden Age 3D, and I've got some allies in the UAE who are fundraising at this moment, and I have a Hollywood producer as my partner. We've already fleshed out quite a project. It's going to cost some money, but at this point, I'm quietly optimistic. These film projects take years to put together, but I think that this is the only way to reach the numbers of people that we need to reach, at least in my lifetime. I also have a thing called New Foundations for Peace, and that focuses on curriculum and so on, but I decided about 5 years ago that I could spend the rest of my days discussing curriculum modules with ministers of education and never, ever accomplish anything. So I'm sorry to say that's, so far, kind of a dream rather than a result. So I've talked over my time. I appreciate your patience, and if there's time, I'm happy to take questions and argue and discuss at your leisure. So, thank you. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I'm actually on crutches, so I'm
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've actually developed a curriculum that I'm living in BC right now. I've been here for the last 6 months doing some research. But that curriculum is now with the BC Federation of Teachers. As far as I know, they haven't done much with it. But it's a fairly well-developed curriculum to look at integrating some of the history that you've discussed.
Sure.
And other ideas into the public school system
Right.
in Canada. One point that I wanted to bring up, and I interviewed this, I researched this extensively because I have a Muslim friend whose father witnessed partition between Pakistan and India, and the person of Gandhi is of somewhat of a controversial figure for some Muslims who witnessed partition.
Right.
So when you mentioned him and said that, I can't remember the name of the leader that you had
Akbar,
mentioned,
yeah.
but you said he's the next best to Gandhi.
Right.
From what I've learned, I would be careful about how you phrase that, because Gandhi is also known as someone who ignored rapes of Muslim women during partition, and that's well documented. I can share with you the documentation. So just to make a comment about that
Okay.
it's not widely accepted that Gandhi is the best in the Muslim community.
Yeah, I understand.
Or Muslim communities. And part of the problematic that I outlined in the curriculum was that Gandhi is, carte blanche, always said, oh, Gandhi in the Western curriculum. How wonderful, look what he did. He was peace-loving and this and that. Well, other people in the Muslim community have, some whom are still alive, can recount another experience.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Point taken.
Thank you so much. I've been involved in education for a number of years, and I think the question is that there is too much of, maybe there is enough of information, research, work on curriculum, on including Muslims into the Western context, and et cetera, et cetera. One could start with Susan Douglas and end up with the woman here, and I think lots of work is being done. The question is not so much about now information is not there. The question is the approach. And one of the criticism towards presenting Muslim history in the West has been that we are either Orientalist or apologetic. Either we say Muslims are all bad, or either we romanticize and idealize them to the level that they become all unquestionable people. And if you ask questions about them, then you are in big trouble. So as a historian, I think one is important thing is to show them as human beings. Akbar may be a little bit better than Gandhi, but I think we should not idealize Akbar to that level also. And so on. So I think, or Saladin or whatever. I think it's very important that we do not only present the wonderful things that we do, and I really appreciate, but we see these people as contested, as human beings evolving with all kind of imperfections. And that is what will be acceptable for both Muslims and non-Muslims, rather than saying that there is nothing but just almost like ideal angels out there.
No. Well, in Lost History, I do go into that, and I got a lot of complaints about, so I presented some counter-narratives on Al-Hakim in Cairo, the Fatimid leader. And oh my gosh, I mean, it got so bad in the editorial department at National Geographic, I was worried the book was going to be killed just over that. So it's a minefield, but I agree. I mean, I talked about Ibn Sina's drinking problem. I mean, he drank a lot of wine. And I had somebody come up and say that I had slandered him and so on. And I said, well, it's possible this information is not true. But I presented this to show these as real people who they weren't angels, and I don't, well, yeah, I guess you could say some of them were saints in their own way, but they were not angels. Yeah. They were people. Yeah.
I just want to thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Really excellent. You know, one of the fascinating... what did I do? One of the fascinating story, actually, in reading history is Muslim Spain. I was intrigued by what you said, and actually I have come across this because once I visited Spain, and as a matter of fact, I told my Muslim friends, the Muslims should not do the pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina, but they should go to Cordoba for the pilgrimage, because they did far greater things than... Anyway, so I noticed that every year there is a festival, every year there is a festival where everyone in the town has to put a pig at the entrance of the house, like half of it, you know. And so when I asked, you know, what's going on here? You know what they told me? He said, this is from the days, you know, when the Muslims were expelled. In order to prove that you are not a Muslim, you have, one way of showing it is that you eat bacon, you eat, you know. So it is still going on. My question is this, like for historians as well as for the, you know, the Spaniards, like how could you possibly describe what happened in Spain as if it was a reconquest, or they were called the Moors, like as if it was a foreign occupation? After 700 years, they were as Spanish as you could possibly be. I mean, it's like the United States is it's all like slightly more than 200 years. And it will be very insulting for the American to say, you know, you are still British, for example. Right. So somebody like Averroes, who was very, very Spanish. So it was a European Islam. It was not like an Islam came from Arabia. Which is true that at the beginning it was like this. But later on, so the terms we use, reconquest, it was not reconquest. Actually, it was a conquest of the north, of the south. And two, that this Moorish thing, as if it's you know, something, as you mentioned, like something happens, it was a bad thing, and now we got rid of it. It was not Moorish. Actually, that's really a comment, but my question, how could we go about, like, you know, changing some of these really fundamental mistakes in the way we write history? And I know, like, you know, writing a curriculum, I've been involved in this process, but, you know, you cannot imagine the enormity of the resistance. Right. And, you know, I appreciate what you said, but, you know, even when you go around trying to, like, you know, to present at least a realistic figure about Muhammad, you know, actually in a book called Civilization History, which is used for grade 11. You know what they say about Muhammad? They said he was a merchant, and so therefore, when he met Khadija, who was a rich woman, it was only natural for a merchant to look for a rich woman. Like, in other words, as if his motivation was purely financial. Probably part of it was, but the man had other objectives for sure. This is my, sorry I took too long.
No, that was interesting, and you know, there are great academics like Noam Chomsky who look at the way words define narrative, and the choice of words have this political and distorting impact. I mean, reconquest. In fact, Iberia, Spain, had been conquered multiple times and occupied. The Visigoths, who were the ruling regime when Tariq ibn Ziyad came up from Morocco, they were a German group. They were a Germanic tribe that had come in after the Romans. They were not natives. That's why they were so easily thrown out by the invaders, because the local Jews and Christians were fed up with them and switched sides. But so this reconquest thing, that's a particular political narrative, and I think a lot of Spanish are really curious and more open to finding out more about that time. But it's funny how just a choice of one word defines so much. It's amazing. Yes.
My name is Habib Ali, and I'm the Secretary of the Canadian Council of Imams. I'm very, very impressed with your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I have 3 points. Number one,